Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
It is ridiculous and it is against the laws of nature that we can have somebody sitting pretty who takes home more money than the credible entrepreneur who is doing actual production of goods and services.
We always say it as it is. It is only in this country that when a thief is arrested, you hear elders from their tribe saying, he is our son and he is our thief.
If you are deviant and I call you leader,
Yes.
probably you are already a leader, but you are leading in the wrong direction.
We want to see the role of the youth in the security, governance, and development.
The youth that I meet and work with here, you know, we call them the millennials and X's and Y's, this and that. They don't necessarily want to live like their fathers and grandfathers, do business like their fathers and grandfathers. They're more independent, they're better educated, and they're the ones that are making everything move in this region.
We look at the issues, we talk about issues that impact people's lives in Africa. The African peoples themselves continue to cheer bad leaders, and because they cheer them on, they continue to be misled.
Let me ask you, doctor, would you rather be somebody who does not enjoy so much freedom but you are rich?
Yes.
Or you'd rather be poor who you are actually imprisoned by the poverty itself?
My goal is not to come here and say, I want the majority ownership, I want to own this, I want to own that, I want to do this. My goal is we all make money and we're all happy, and I help build a big business here.
Punchline is for Africa, with Africa, from Africa.
Viewers, good morning, Africa, wherever you are. We are looking at the rise of, from the ashes of the judiciary of the Republic of Kenya. For the last 2 years, since the nullification of elections of 2017, the judiciary of the Republic of Kenya has been on the headlines and in every newspaper worldwide, nationally, regionally, and Africa at large. The nullification of that election brought what we call a dual system of courage of justice.
That the presidential election held on 8th August 2017 was not conducted in accordance with the Constitution and the applicable law, rendering the declared results invalid, null, and void.
The justice that is demanded by civil society, international civil society, and local civil societies, and the justice demanded by the interest of the nation. Given the two, which one do Kenyans want? Do they want the interest of the nation? In the interest of the nation, President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta decided to go back to campaign in order to show the world that he was able, and he is able, and he was the winner. The campaigns took place, an election was reconducted. For the second time, Uhuru emerged the winner of that election. From then, the judiciary has never been a judiciary for the people of Kenya. It has been a judiciary commanded, supported, equipped logistically by either local NGOs or international NGOs that tell them on what to do, not to do, And above all, the situation of judicial officers themselves being activists. We have seen a number of judges acting like activists on the streets, making decisions that are not in the interest of the judiciary and not in the interest of the country at large. The release of terrorists or alleged terrorists from courts using the law, and then the terrorists return to kill many Kenyans, is one of the factors that has caught our eye. In Africa School of Thought, we believe that Chief Justice Maraga and his entire team, or Chief Justice Maraga, the Deputy Chief Justice, Madam Mwiru, have not done a service for this country. They have misused the powers conferred upon them by the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya to either do politicking or accuse the executive of being political or being a witch hunter against the judiciary. Time and time again, President Uhuru Kenyatta has pumped in money in the judiciary to raise the standards of the employees of the judiciary, to give the judges freedom and welfare that they are able to conduct their affairs without interference. Is it time now for the Kenyans to say we have had enough of a bad judiciary? Is it time now for us to fight and for Africa to rise up? Because we see a lot of shrinkage of constitutionalism being done by the judges. If you look at what the judges in Malawi did, they did it in the morning, they reversed it in the afternoon, they ate it during dinner. Is this what Kenyans want? I leave it to you, Kenyans. Our hopes lie on the judicial service, the new judicial service system that has been put there, and hopefully, and only hopefully, that one day we shall rise from the ashes of corruption. Thank you.
It is a very good morning to you, and we're glad that you're watching us this morning, just a few minutes past 11 a.m. Here in Nairobi. Thank you so much for watching us. This is the 16th day of June 2019, the Day of the African Child that is being celebrated across Africa. And this day has been celebrated since June 16th every year since 1991, when it was first initiated by the Organization of African Unity, and it honors those who participated in the Soweto uprising in 1976 on that day. Well, in case you're wondering what was the events happening that time in South Africa, well, in Soweto, South Africa, on June 16th, 1976, like I mentioned there before, about 10,000 black school children marched in a column more than half a mile long, protesting the poor quality of their education and demanding their right to be taught in their own language. Indeed, it's a very significant day for the African child today, and we'll just take a bit of that and see if at all the call that the children at South Africa at that time wanted for better education, has it translated to other African countries. And indeed, Kenya today, we are having a reading of our budget, and you can see education sector gets the hugest, the big chunk of the allocation in today's budget that will be read later on in Parliament. But first of all, I'd like me to introduce my co-host today, Samuel Tawish.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm okay.
It is the Day of the African Child. I know we have a lot to talk about, especially the budget that is being read today. And it is one of the most ambitious budgets we've had since our independence in this country. But this Day of the African Child that was started by the Organization of African Unity, now it is AU in 1991, after South African kids marched, remember, during the apartheid, and they wanted, they were protesting against poor education. I think these were black South Africans. They were protesting against poor education and demanding the right to be taught in their own language. How is that significant to the rest of African continent?
Well, thank you so much, Miriam. I will say that it's a very important day for the African child, because it's a day that we make a reflection of where we are and what best we have done in trying to create opportunities, more so like you alluded to, in ensuring that our kids can get better education and also equal opportunities in other aspects of life. So it's a very, very important occasion that as a country or even as a continent, we need really to think deeply. What is it that we are doing for our young generation? Are we creating that enough environment, good environment, and enough opportunities for them to thrive in whatever kind of things they're pursuing in life? For example, the education, and also after education, are they empowered enough even to go out there and, if it's not about seeking white-collar jobs, are they in a position, for example, also maybe to start up their own businesses and create employment for others? I think that is where the discussion is today, and that is what we need really to interrogate keenly and see if we are actually in the right path or not. But I will say so far so good. As a continent, we are doing relatively well, not that well, because again, opportunities for young children continually are being opened, especially on the education front. Yeah.
All right, and when you look at the African continent, and it has been ravaged, a lot of countries, well, a good number of countries have been ravaged by civil wars, and we see the people who are caught up in this mayhem or in this chaos are the children, and they get very affected, of course, together with women and men too as well, but children get the most affected. Has the continent been very kind to the African child?
Well, I will say not really, because again, there are so many challenges that we still face as a people, and more so the young generation. There are things that the young generation, or this young young people continually face, not as a result of their own making, but because of maybe our failures in one or two things. So that is why today, like you just mentioned, that maybe when it comes to this, the wars, the violence, the uprisings, and so many things that continue to bedevil the continent of Africa, that the most vulnerable, group is the young people and women. That is not to say that men are equally not affected, but then going forward, what is it that maybe we can do? Because again, today you see we still have those reports about people migrating to migrating to go for greener pasture, perceived greener pastures, yet again they end up maybe being into forced labor. They end up being killed, some of them. These are stories that we do not continually want the generation or our children to go through. These are things that we have the ability and capacity to correct as a people. Especially the responsibility and obligation to ensure that this is done lies mostly on the leadership, because they have that opportunity and at least some resources to change the perception and the reality about where we live and what we need for our basic survival.
All right. Thank you so much. So today is the Day of the African Child. Please, wherever you're watching us from, let us know, has the continent been very kind to the African child? With the many deaths that we see child soldiers who have participated in wars or recruited or forced into. We see child labor in countries like Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, in the cocoa fields and across Africa. Has the continent been very kind to the African child? Please let us know that. But also we have other topics that we'll be looking at. That is the budget. Today, I think all East African countries are having their budgets read today. Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda. Is Burundi also part of that?
I guess so.
All right. So we are having these 5 countries are having their budgets read today, and I will just give you. We talked about it in yesterday's afternoon show, but also we would like to continue that conversation, because today Kenya's the CS for Treasury will be having the budget reading in the Kenyan Parliament today. So that we will look at, and also Is corruption the enemy of Kenya's budget? Yesterday, as we were just looking at that, we could see, as much as fine, it is the most ambitious budget in this country, and we could see, fine, maybe the allocations are fair in regards to the different, the different institutions that the money was being directed into. But also we realized that when you look at last year's budget and we see that was what was projected and that was what was given to certain institutions or ministry, but we really can't trace where that money did in those ministries. So corruption really has been the biggest enemy, but we'll also expound on that and see what else is there with the Kenyan institutions fighting the corruption, DCI and DPP going and getting FBI's help in regards to fighting corruption. Will that even change anything in regards to the fight against corruption? And also I'll look at the African news headlines, and then we'll just have a conversation about what is making news across Africa. And maybe I'll just do that straight, and then we'll come back to this later, right?
All right.
So let me just give you the latest and what is happening from this continent this morning. And we start with Uganda, where 3 cases of Ebola have been confirmed in Uganda, a neighboring country to the Democratic Republic of Congo, officials said on Wednesday, June 12th. On Tuesday, the World Health Organization announced that a 5-year-old boy had been diagnosed in Uganda, apparently after crossing over from the DRC. World Health Organization officials also said it was the first Ebola case in Uganda during the ongoing outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And in Sudan, stores and restaurants reopened on Wednesday in Khartoum after Sudan's protest leaders decided to end the civil disobedience launched after the army's brutal crackdown. The move, they say, is to resume talks with the ruling generals. Despite the reopening of some shops, many residents prefer to remain at home due to the heavy deployment of security forces across the streets of Khartoum. And still in Sudan, Hollywood star George Clooney has urged the U.S. Treasury Department to take action to block illicit money flows coming out of Sudan. In a joint op-ed in Politico written with human rights activist John Pendergast, Sudan is in the midst of a political crisis after security forces opened fire on pro-democracy protesters in the capital Khartoum last week. The U.S. actor wants the Treasury to issue an anti-money laundering advisory to thousands of banks around the world to be on the lookout for illicit funds coming out of Sudan. And in Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari says that the government has the capacity to lift 100 million people out of poverty in the next 10 years. He made the comment in a speech in the capital Abuja to mark Nigeria's Democracy Day and the end of military rule 20 years ago. Mr. Buhari said there was a strong connection between corruption, economic inequality and insecurity in the country, but with leadership and sense of purpose, the challenges will be overcome. Currently, Nigeria has the highest rate of extreme poverty in the world. And also still in Nigeria, the president yesterday renamed Abuja National Stadium in honor of Mashood Abiola, who is revered in the country as the hero of democracy. The christening for the president ascending to demands by civil society and the people of southwest Nigeria to give fitting memory of Chief Abiola, who died in detention on July 7th, 1998, more than 5 years after his presumed win on June 12th, 1993 elections against Bashir Tofa. And in Ethiopia, the text messaging service in Ethiopia has been shut down. And the news comes as the country experiences its 3rd day in a row with a break in online access. The shutdown on Tuesday and Wednesday both proved temporary, and the closure of the text messaging services coincides with the nationwide exams in the country, and there has been speculation that the internet blackout is aimed at trying to stop people cheating, and that has not been confirmed by authorities. And in Algeria, a former Prime Minister of Algeria, Ahmed Oyai, has appeared in the country's Supreme Court as a series of investigations into high-level corruption continues. Mr. Oyai led governments under ex-President Abdulaziz Bouteflika, who was forced to resign in April after weeks of street protests. Corruption investigators have been targeting senior officials and businessmen who were close to Mr. Bouteflika during his 20 years in power. And of course, in the latest from the Women's World Cup, a brilliant goal by former Liverpool forward Asisata Oshoala helped earn Nigeria first win at the 2019 Women's World Cup. And Nigeria went ahead when defender Kim Do-in scored an own goal. They were playing with South Korea. And in the Democratic Republic of Congo, some 100,000 people have fled villages in northern eastern Ituri province of the Democratic Republic of Congo, according to its governor Jean Banamisa. It comes after 38 people were killed when armed men raided villages on Monday and Tuesday. Mr. Banamisa says that people have headed to the provincial capital Bunia. The army says it has identified the perpetrators, a relatively new militia led by a man named Gojolo, and there is a history of conflict in the area between the pastoralist Hema ethnic group and the agriculturalist Lendu community, mostly over land. And we go to Egypt, where an Egyptian court has reportedly sentenced 32 defendants to life in prison for plotting to assassinate both President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the former Saudi Crown Prince Nayib bin Abdul Aziz Al Saud. The accused allegedly planned to carry out the killings while Mr. Sisi was on the pilgrimage to Mecca 5 years ago. The group was also found guilty of killing 2 judges, 4 policemen and a civilian. And in South Africa, the resignation of former South African President Jacob Zuma allies from Parliament after they were overlooked for cabinet positions has left the ruling National Congress keenly watching their next move. While analysts cite an economic motive in the resignations, the pensions for ex-ministers is higher than that of members of Parliament's salary. The fact that most of them are allies of the disgraced Zuma suggests a political motive too. And we go to Mali, where Mali President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has announced 3 days of national mourning in homage to the victims of Sobena di village massacre that left dozens of people dead. The Malian government on Wednesday sacked the governor of the central Mopti region, where Monday's terrorist attack against members of the ethnic Dogon group occurred. And we end with Cameroon, where Defense Ministry say that more than 300 heavily armed Boko Haram fighters attacked military positions on Darak, an island near Lake Chad in Cameroon's far north region, some 1,000 kilometers from the capital Yaoundé. The toll, which has revised several times since the attack, was put at 24 deaths, of which 16 were soldiers and 8 civilians. The ministry said 84 fighters were killed and 8 taken into custody. So that is the latest from Africa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. So Tawish,
yeah, a
lot of things are happening in Africa this morning, but it seems to be some sort of good news from Sudan. I don't know how you look at it. Shops and restaurants are up and running now.
Well, that has been the desire of the people of that particular country, because again, with all this kind of violence and disruptions, it cannot be easy to carry out a business as usual. But then that tells you it's an indication enough that maybe, things are returning back to normalcy, and probably is a sigh of relief for the people in that country. So I think that is the way to go. Much as there's normally advocation for what you maybe rightfully believe it's yours, maybe it's an advocation for democracy, or you're advocating for, change of government, like what you've been saying in these countries. The most important thing is that we should have time frames for all this. There comes a time when we need to go back and rebuild our country. It can't be continually fights and violence and disruptions, because again economies go down, and in that respect therefore we'll be destroying not only our lives and our futures, but the future of the generations to come.
And also I think it's a good move, because yesterday the protesters side came out to announce and said, you know what, we are going to hold this civil disobedience protest, and in exchange to talks with the military. Remember, they had made some demands, and they wanted the opposition leaders that were arrested by the government on Friday. The PM for Ethiopia had flown in to mediate, so immediately he left. The government went and arrested key opposition figures. But later on, I think after the protesters demanded, one of their preconditions for them to join back the talks is for the opposition's leaders to be released, which the government did, but deported them to South Sudan. But I also think that, I think it's a good move, because there has to be some consensus. You can't, when you keep hardlining positions, guess who is going to suffer? The larger Sudan. They will not have a country. So I think it's good for the moving forward of Sudan, because the situation was turning out to be very, very murky. And I hope they agree on the key matters that really they were not agreeing to, that being the content that they want in the constitution. Remember, that is really the main point they're fighting about. And also, hopefully, they can have a military transition a
civilian president.
Yes, very, very soon, because that is also one of the demands. But also now, still in Sudan, and Hollywood star George Clooney.
Yeah.
He has an NGO that works there together with human rights activist John Pendergast. I wish Doctor was here. he would have a lot to say
addressed
about
it.
this,
Yeah, sure.
because yesterday, these two in Congress, they urged the U.S. Treasury Department to take action to block illicit money flows coming out of Sudan.
Yeah.
Not going into Sudan, coming out of Sudan, because apparently George Clooney has, the NGO normally just tracks, works on tracking money laundering and ending money laundering. So mostly it focuses in that.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a particular reason why it's very keen on Sudan and the matters in Sudan?
Well, I may not be an expert enough to really tell exactly why he made maybe such comments, but I mean, from a literal point of view, I believe, and I think it has been the opinion of so many people, that what we have been seeing in Sudan and in most African countries has had an outside hand, and I think it is just coming now to light. I mean, it's now we are getting to understand exactly what could have been behind maybe such kind of protest, and maybe the attempt by the protesters to try and disrupt the operations in Sudan. So that tells you clearly that I mean, there are people with vested interest when we get into such kind of levels with these uprisings and these protests. You remember even last time, I mean, it was Dr. Masanga who was saying on the very set that who is it that is supplying food to these people? I mean, they get food, they get water, they get every other thing. I remember it is. I don't know if it was you who was asking that question. They have been in
earlier this year, actually late December.
Yeah, but they're getting every logistical support that they require to carry out this protest. That tells you that there's actually an external hand. But again, with or without an external hand, the most important thing is the protest. Is it for the interest of a larger majority of the people in Sudan? That is the question. Is it for the interest of these people? Is it for the betterment of that particular country? I think that is where the discussion should be, and not necessarily whether this person who is funding or not. Is it really for the betterment of Sudan as a country? What is it that the people are really agitating for? Is it something that is right according to them? So looking into all this, I mean, with the agitation of removing President al-Bashir from power, they now want to install maybe a civilian government. We want to see how that is going to pan out. Like I said last time, I mean, even with these victories, when it comes to any agitation, any victory has to be definitive. I mean, you have to be sure exactly what do you want to achieve in the long run. It's not just about, ousting a president or getting this independence, and then after that you do not have a clear strategy on how you're going to manage things.
All right, thank you so much. Well, let me just appreciate some of our viewers who have tuned in this morning. And Cheng Simplice, is it Simplice or Simplice? You're saying good morning, Punchline. Indeed, good morning to you. Eze Tobias Ezeamaku, you're saying good morning, my people. Greetings from Spain. Hey, greetings to you. What time is it there in Spain? I think 2 hours behind, maybe 9 something, right? 9, could be 9:30 or something. Sean Wesonga, you're saying good discussions. Well done. Well, thank you. Agot, you're saying good morning, Dr. Matsanga and Miriam. Today it's me and Samuel Tawish. Dr. Matsanga had some few things to take care of, so hopefully he'll join us in the afternoon show. But thank you so much for tuning in. And Michael Groans, you're saying good morning from Germany. Indeed, Guten Morgen to you. Sami Green is saying, I wanted you people to read the situation on Biafra. There seems to be a lot of problems in Biafra this morning. Please let us know in case you have any news that is coming from Biafra. Let us know. We'll be happy to share with the rest of the world. But thank you so much, Sammy, Stephen. And you're saying, oh, there's something here you sent. Let me just read through it. You're saying there's 27 newly appointed Court of Appeal judges. Well, I can't go through the whole list. But let me see what you're saying down there. From the south to southwest to southeast. So the same educational disadvantaged north has the best citizens to be appointed, whereas Anambra State has the highest number of lawyers. And so you're saying I think what he's trying to say here,
the imbalance.
Please correct me if it's the injustice when it comes to even the distribution of the national resources and even positions in government. President Buhari seems to be favoring people who are from the other side, and people who are perceived to be from Biafra or from Biafra land or there around are left out in some of these appointments. Does such level of injustices, because you'll feel like it is an injustice, really acts to fuel even more need for secession for, say, a group like people from Biafra?
It does, when there's a genuine feeling that maybe people from this other end as qualified as the others. I mean, they equally really deserve to get these positions. There's no justification whatsoever as to why maybe we can have one region get about 24, as it has been alluded here, 24 and 23, I beg your pardon, and the other actually getting just a paltry 4. That tells you that there's a lot of imbalance and disparity when it comes to actually trying to allocate these positions. But I think these are some of the things, like you pointed out, that really sometimes even create anarchy. They create that disaffection towards maybe a government. And this is something that President Buhari really has to relook into. I mean, this number, you can't quite really even compare. 4 to 23, it is really not you can't compare.
There's not even much. But also there have been like legitimate reports from that part of the land, and it says that when it comes to the whole of Nigeria, the part that is less developed, poverty is stricken, and we'll talk about that because I read some news here and it's really ridiculous. Nigeria being one of the leading countries that produces oil in Africa, guess what? It has the highest rate of extreme poverty in the world. Where is the imbalance?
Well, you know, we hoped maybe with the natural resources like oil, for example, diamond, like what has been happening, for example, in DR Congo and other countries in the African continent, that these resources can be used to uplift people's, lives. But on the contrary, I mean, these resources have continually been exploited by the elites for their own benefits and for their own families, which is something unfortunate. I mean, we need to really think how we are going to be using or to be benefiting from these resources. Like, for example, Kenya today, we have oil in Turkana, and we have so many challenges that the people of Turkana are really facing that we have to accept. So we cannot go and, for example, just drill the oil from Turkana and leave the people of Turkana without anything. I mean, they will have a reason to complain. And actually, these are people are going to group and come and disrupt even governments. They make it impossible for even this oil itself to be distilled, to be drilled. You remember last time when we had those protests, the people of Turkana going to block these trucks from taking this oil to Mombasa for it to be refined. So it tells you that we need to take cognizance of the fact that the people need really to benefit out of these resources. They are not anyone's investment. It is for the good of a country. It is God-given. So it has to benefit each and everyone if that is what it calls for. Other than us seeing the kind of disparities, like, for example, in Nigeria today. Sometimes even in Nigeria, you find that people even go without petrol. But you can't quite understand when this is one of the largest oil-producing countries.
Delta, yes.
It's a very big challenge. It's something we really need to think about. It's because of these cartels we have. It's because of corruption. That is why you see we cannot have it when we really have it. You see, it is. It's a sharp contrast of what should be the reality.
Really
yes, we can't have it when we have it.
Yes, it's quite oxymoronic. But also, as I was saying just before going into that point there, that Nigeria has the highest rate of extreme poverty in the world.
Yeah.
In the world. Compare it with Somalia, compare it with in the world. This is a country that has been fairly stable, and of course yesterday they were marking 20 years of democracy, because remember before then they were having army military rulership until 20 years ago when they started having civilian rulership, democracy actually 20 years ago. So while President Muhammadu Buhari was leading those celebrations, also he said that corruption and economic inequality, there's a connection between corruption, economic inequality, and insecurity in the country. So of course corruption also is a big problem in Nigeria, and you can see even how the distribution of resources to, say, place like Biafra land, as I was saying before, you find that it has the most poor roads. There are no hospitals. The distribution of national resources is you can't even talk about it. The infrastructure is wanting completely. So that is one of the reasons why I think people from Biafra land feel that if you really can't provide for us as you should, if you can't treat us like we're part of move, then why don't you just let us go? And of course, that has advised the call for secession, but also corruption and economic inequality. The President Buhari was talking as a connection between this, and you look at it in regards to what is happening in Biafra, and what the level of hypocrisy is that?
In fact, that is where I was coming. I don't know how you read my mind. I mean, it's
I think I read it twice and I realized, come on, this
it's a very big.
doing to these people.
It's indeed a very big irony.
Yes.
And now that President Buhari himself is acknowledging that these are the challenges that Nigeria is facing: corruption, poverty, and economic inequality. And then he's a person actually at the helm of government in Nigeria. He's a person who should come out and provide solutions to the challenges that the people are facing. So if he comes out and just or simply acknowledges, but without giving the initiatives is putting in place to ensure that maybe these challenges are going to be resolved, so that like for example the people of Biafra who are calling for a referendum, for example, so that they can go separate ways. These are very simple things that they have been agitating for a very long time. I mean, just allowing a referendum. In any case,
52 years.
Yeah. In any case, they feel like President Buhari doesn't care really about the people of Biafra. He's not doing so much, like you've talked, the issue of roads, maybe schools, and so much that is not being done in Nigeria, in Biafra land. It looks like Biafra is not part of Nigeria, and I think that is what the people have been championing on ground. They feel like, I mean, it's time we need to go separate ways. So, but Buhari cannot allow this to happen, yet he still continues to disenfranchise these people from this particular region. So it really gives reason for that agitation. It gives reason for these people to feel like it is time for us really to push for this referendum. So for President Buhari, I think he has had this opportunity yet again, whether he was validly elected or not. He's the president democratically now in office. We recognize that. So he has to try his level best, at least with them. They normally go into an election after 4 years. Is it 4 or 5 years? So within this period, he has to try and level his reasoning and see into it, how can he address these issues that are being raised, especially when it comes to poverty, it comes to economic inequality and corruption, because he can't pass the blame to any other person. He's the person at the helm of government. It stops with him.
All right. And also he mentioned insecurity as one of the connection between corruption, economic equality, and insecurity. And right now we see the extremist group Boko Haram has really grown its tentacles, not just in Nigeria, but it is spreading across Africa.
Yeah.
And I think I read also while I was going through just that information, he said, or he alluded, that his government has done its best in curbing the spread of Boko Haram. When we see the information in the ground, it's contrary to what the president is talking about. Does he even know what is really, is he in touch with the reality in Nigeria and across Africa, because Boko Haram is all over now?
I think most of these leaders, it's not that they are not really in touch. They know exactly what is happening, but I think they have just chosen to ignore. They have chosen to ignore deliberately. I mean, because, it's maybe through this that is why they remain in power. That is why they will continually have a reason to be re-elected or to be where they are today. So they will not want these people to be empowered. They will not want them to be enlightened. They will not want to see these people actually get better roads or their kids go to schools and get better education. So they will want these people to be continually focused on the challenges, these small challenges that they're going through, so that they may not even have the opportunity to advance for any change. And something else maybe I just want to add is that maybe if President Buhari and most of these people who are feeling maybe or facing these challenges in as regards to corruption, they should borrow a leaf from President Kenyatta, for example, here in Kenya. You remember some years back, President Kenyatta used to it's like there's another person who should be doing it. You remember when he used to say, what can I do?
And Kenyans really went...
Yeah.
Kenyans did not take that.
They got hard on him and told him.
I think that's where he saw the light.
Yeah, come on.
We expect you to fight this.
Yeah, come on. You can't quite continually give us excuses as to why we can't get rid of corruption. You are the person whom we have given powers. You are the person who is appointing these ministers to these portfolios. If there's any of these ministers or even all of them who are failing you, you should fire and get other people who are suitable and people who are competent enough to serve in those specific portfolios. So we cannot continually sit pretty and continue to listen to the excuses resources. So President Kenyatta took up the challenge. You've seen what he has done of late, including the changes at the DCI, the changes at the DPP, also trying to do a radical surgery in as far as the judiciary is concerned, because the judiciary and the centerpiece of the judiciary is actually the JSC. So that is why you see President Kenyatta has really been so keen on making sure that we have a change within the JSC. And I want to say that so far so good, because the individuals who have been working within the JSC, who are actually a compromised lot, who are part of the cartel, the corruption cartel that we are facing in this country. So with the kind of changes, we hopefully feel as a people that there's maybe going to be some hope and some change within the judiciary, and they're going to give a helping hand to President Kenyatta in the fight against corruption. So far, I would want to say this is doing something, that is visible, something that is tangible. We have seen several other arrests that have been done by these agencies, albeit we have this challenge with the judiciary. These people are arrested today, they are released tomorrow or hours. Even by the time you take these people to court, they already have what they call anticipatory bail. You can't quite understand how they are working at loggerheads, how they are working at crossroads, the same institution which is supposed to be in support of what President Kenyatta is doing, or in support of the government, because they are part and parcel of government.
Yes, but also just to add on that, of course, the CJ, David Maraga, has come out to say, you know what, yes, we also want to prosecute these cases that you bring us, but if the agencies that are supposed to be bringing us the evidence, you don't bring us evidence that is enough. And also the law as it is right now, this is what it says. So I'm just following the law. That is what the CJ has come out saying. We are just following the law. This is all the law says. And maybe there's a loophole when it comes to criminal laws in this country. Do you think perhaps Parliament, I doubt they can do it, but if they had the best interest of Kenyans at heart, and seeing that corruption has become a very lucrative endeavor here in Kenya. It's very lucrative endeavor here in Kenya. Nothing seems to be stopping anybody from looting from public coffers, especially. Should there be a complete whole and a complete reform when it comes to criminal laws in this country, especially in matters the same way they did when it comes to, they changed, I think they changed very quickly when it came to fighting terrorism in Kenya, and they sort of had to amend some of those so that it allows more time for this. If you're suspected, you're kept longer in the cells and things like that to allow proper investigations. Should we have such reforms when it comes to criminal laws justice here in Kenya?
You've pointed that fact of MPs actually trying to maybe legislate and see how we can maybe make reforms in the justice system in Kenya today. And fortunately, Miriam, our lawmakers today are like part and parcel of the corrupt cartel we have in the country. They are more or less culprits in one way or another, because how else can you define people who want to get more than they really deserve? I mean, that is being corrupt in itself. For example, when MPs are championing to get more funding, they have, as we speak, even as we get into discussing about the budget today, they have added 3 billion Kenya shillings to the CDF kitty. I mean, additionally to what they have been using to what they have been getting in the past. So that tells you that there's a lot of selfishness rather amongst our lawmakers, people who are supposed to legislate, people who are supposed to actually help us in as far as curbing all these kind of issues are concerned. But now we have the same people also who have vested interest in the same issues that we want them to correct. So that tells you we need to relook into this constitution and see how best we can empower the judiciary, not necessarily in terms of the personnel, but one, if it's the resources, like they've been complaining that they want to get more resources, maybe we relook into that. They want to get maybe more infrastructure. We also have to look into that. But far from that, we have seen so many changes in other agencies in the fight against corruption, for example. It cannot be that all these agencies have been failing and it's only the judiciary which is right. It cannot be that, the DCI and the investigative agencies can go out there, investigate and do arrests and arraign these people in court, and then they don't have a case. But you get the point? It's become a pattern, almost a pattern.
But also we have to, if you just have to pedal back just a few years ago, the EACC, even at some point, Kenyans are complaining, is becoming like a massage parlor. These people are arrested, they go in, they come out, they go in, they come out, and then that's it. And also the DPP's office, we see it was before it was very complacent, and also the DCI, it was not. So this institution, it is just now with this new leadership that we have right now that they seems to have really taken this work very, very seriously. But before then, really, we just knew of EACC as the one who was supposed to be fighting corruption, but these other institutions were, and when the EACC was not to be honest, is not really doing enough. So maybe with the new revitalized energy and focus and purpose to fight corruption from these very important institutions, but also we need help from Parliament. Let them make legislations that will actually help, so that when these cases are taken to the judiciary, they will not have an excuse as to why they cannot prosecute. They will not have an excuse as to why they'll use the law, as to why somebody cannot be locked in for if it's necessary, so that to allow a proper, investigations to take place. Because when they come out from having these bonds, they come and they tamper with the witnesses, they tamper with the evidence, they tamper with everything. So I think legislation is also very important, even as we look at this whole spectrum on the successful fight against corruption. Find the judiciary before has been seen to be very weak in regards to that, but also these other bodies. But we see a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of efforts be put. So now we need proper laws that can really help, and there will be no loophole, from my opinion. I think right now there's a loophole, and they're using that.
Sure. You remember some time back there was this discussion around maybe legislating a law that will compel maybe judges to have the suspects who have been arrested on corruption allegations to be actually locked in for, say, 90 days, for example, as we do the investigation, without actually the alternatives of being given maybe bonds or being let out and all those kinds of things. But you see, that discussion actually fizzled out. I haven't quite seen it anywhere, because like I said, the people who are supposed to legislate, the people who actually have the mandate to do it, in most times there's culprits. So it's a very big challenge. I mean, when it comes to something that touches on them, they will always come together.
But now where does that leave us as Kenyans? Should we worry? Should we take to the street? Do we need a referendum? Now what?
The problem now, many times we say when we get into an election, we are going to get new people, we are going to get fresh blood, people who are determined to actually execute their jobs well. I mean, we have had these changes every other election time, but once someone gets to that house, I'm telling you, it's like there's a new baptism that happens all together, and they get very confused. You've seen the likes of I didn't want I'm not comfortable to mention his name, but let me mention all the same. Muhammad Ali.
I mean,
the Jicho Pevu. I mean, not necessarily being quiet, but you've seen him actually even siding with the people that maybe a majority of Kenyans perceive to be corrupt. It may or may not be true, yes, but there's a perception that maybe this group of people or these individuals may be corrupt. So, but we have seen Jicho Pevu. In fact, even when he used to work as a journalist, I remember he used to do so many articles, so many of the investigative pieces, actually trying to condemn such kind of actions, condemn even these individuals. But today, they're dining in the same table, and you can't quite understand. So and it's not just this one example. There's so many people.
Yes.
We have Sosion, who was a champion of the teachers, who's been nominated. He's quiet. He's not advancing the interests of the teachers anymore. We have so many people like Omboko Milemba, who was also one of the, in the teachers union, and so many people who have been elected really to represent the matters regarding, matters that are affecting the ordinary people. But once these people get in there, they completely forget.
All right.
You get the point.
Sami, Green, you're saying you're watching us from New Delhi in India. Thank you so much. And Africa Rising, thank you for watching. Hope you're watching from Biafra land. Chukujiauba Vincent, you're watching from Paris. And Africa Rising, you're watching from Kwale County. CK Oguson, you're watching from Thailand. And Austin CA, you're saying good morning, Punchline Africa, and you're watching from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And Ara Beth, thank you, good morning. Chetachi, you're saying we stand with Biafra. And also Tobechi Lemeke, you're saying even we Biafrans are given heaven as it is now. We can never live with the Fulanis. Let the world just allow us to live alone. Biafra is our country. So we see Biafra they're not. Bidal Law Lasuda, you're saying corruption in Kenya is endemic. The authority should have kept Professor PLO as head of anti-corruption authority in Kenya to get rid of the corruption and talk to kidogo attitude in Kenya society. Bidal in Brisbane in Australia, and PLO was not even allowed to settle in the office. He was as he came in, quickly he left. I don't even know what he did. How long did he even stay at the EACC? Was he a threat?
He stayed for a considerable period of time.
I can only remember him saying the big fish.
Yeah, but there's something I can't quite figure out. I can't remember exactly what happened, but it had something to do with some MPs. I don't know. Yes. It touched on some MPs regarding.
Nobody was comfortable having PLO.
Yeah, so but they had to carry out that vote and made sure that PLO and his team are going home. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So let's just look at just another 2-3 countries from Africa before we come to what other topics that we have for the day. And of course, today Kenya and indeed the rest of East African countries are having the budget reading today, and we'll try to decipher and look at some of the key pointers into Kenya's budget as it will be read by the CS for Treasury later on in the day. But now there seems to be some new storm brewing from South Africa, and the resignation of former South African President Jacob Zuma allies from Parliament after they were overlooked from cabinet positions. So Jacob Zuma's some members of the ANC, of course, he was out of office because of corruption charges, and even now he still has some cases pending in different courts in South Africa. So some of his allies, because they perceived to have been left out in some of these positions when President Cyril Ramaphosa was choosing making his cabinet appointments, some allies that were perceived to be aligning to former President Jacob Zuma seems to have been left out, and they decided to leave office. So what is this saying? Was it yesterday or the other day?
Yeah.
We're looking at even the politics when it comes to the successors and the predecessors, especially in the African continent. Why is it that we cannot just leave somebody and just bless them to just go on and continue? Because we serve this one wonderful country that we love, so I'll just be happy to see you succeeding. Why is it now, from what is happening right now with Jacob Zuma allies, what kind of message are they trying to send to President Cyril Ramaphosa?
Let me comment on the question of appointments and those who missed out on the appointment, especially regarding the cabinet in South Africa. It should be noted that these appointments should always be based on merit and suitability. That is one. If what President Cyril Ramaphosa has done so far actually anchors those two factors, then I do not really think there's any reason for, complaint or lamentation from this other individual. Second point, President Ramaphosa has to be very, very careful with how he's handling that government, because it should not be lost to him the way he maneuvered and conspired with others to oust President Zuma from office even before his term actually came to an end. And you remember even the same thing happened with Zuma himself when he conspired to remove, was it Thabo Mbeki? I don't quite remember. So it is something that normally people say history repeats itself. Within the same ANC, I will tell you that there are still some elements within the same ANC who maybe were loyalists of the former President Jacob Zuma.
A lot of them.
And are still loyalists to President Jacob Zuma.
A lot of them, yes.
Yeah. And in the same union, there are also people who are actually loyalists to President Ramaphosa. So it tells you that you need to actually strike a very delicate balance when it comes to maybe, say, for example, appointments and trying to appease all these interests. Because if you're not going to do that, it is most likely that maybe you're also going to actually face the same fate that maybe your predecessors actually faced. You get the point?
And bringing that, do you think, like you say, there are people who are now loyal to the former President Jacob Zuma, which has been very apparent, but also there are people who are loyal to now President Cyril Ramaphosa. And ANC is the party that has been in power since 25 years ago.
Yeah.
The end of apartheid. ANC has been the party that has been in power. But also with the long history being in power, the leadership has been accused, or even the members, the top leadership of ANC, to be very corrupt.
Yeah.
To be extremely corrupt. And Jacob Zuma just took it to another level, but a lot of them have been accused. And maybe a lot of these leaders benefited so much when Jacob Zuma was the president. And now President Cyril Ramaphosa is trying to get rid, because when he was campaigning also, his top agenda was corruption. It's very interesting. All these African countries, even Buhari thinks he needs to get rid of corruption. Nigeria, we've had that conversation. I don't even want to get into it. To think that it has the highest number of poverty-ridden citizens in the world, knowing Nigeria the way we know it, something has got to be seriously wrong.
Yeah, and that is why I'm saying you can't quite blame any other person.
It's just wrong.
The responsibility lies, not just responsibility, the responsibility and obligation lies with the people whom we have
and
given
not just
power.
Poverty.
Yeah.
Extreme poverty.
Extreme poverty.
In the world. In the world. I said put Somali in there. Nigeria still has the highest number of extreme poverty. put country like still struggling from war like South Sudan, Nigeria still leads. Like, come on now. Put DRC, well, DRC is one of the richest country in the world. I don't think they realize that.
Yeah.
They could actually take care of this budget we're having here if at all those resources were managed very well. But also now what I wanted to say between now what we see Cyril Ramaphosa and the former President Jacob Zuma, could it be also that issue of perhaps sabotage? Because I didn't do this, because I will perceive this, I'll make sure you don't succeed. I'll make sure, or through my members, the loyalists I have in that parliament, I will act to sabotage. And if that is the mentality, and that is the mentality a lot of the opposition and governments, especially across Africa, political scene normally is, does this serve into the quagmire and the state of economic underdevelopment we are in today? Because we have to sabotage each other.
Yeah. You see, the grudge between President Ramaphosa and the former President Jacob Zuma is still very alive. Why? Because President Jacob Zuma felt like it was really uncalled for. It was unnecessary for him to have been ousted by one of his perceived loyalists. You remember, Ramaphosa was one of the loyalists. In fact, at some point, was even the VP to President Jacob Zuma. It tells you that he felt maybe somehow betrayed, that his deputy could come and conspire to remove him from office even before his term came to an end. So he will do anything that is in a position to do to ensure that, one, he does not succeed in whatever kind of agendas he has for the people of South Africa. Second, if it is possible, he can try as much as he can also to bring him down. It does not really matter whether it is him who is coming back or it's another person or his proxy. The most important thing for President Jacob Zuma is to ensure that he topples, or he ensures that President Ramaphosa does not succeed in whatever kind of agenda he has for the people of South Africa. So it's a very big challenge. Like I said, President Ramaphosa has to wake up to the reality and understand that it is not just a walk in the park being in this office. He still has some elements within the same ruling party. ANC has lived to be, the envy of most of the African countries, if not all. It's a party that has actually lived to be a role model.
A party that has time, yes.
Yeah. So it's not just time that maybe we want to see ANC being destroyed. We've seen some kind of disaffection, people who feel like maybe ANC is not being run in respect to the ideologies that primarily founded it. So they have to relook and rethink as to where the rain started beating them. Because again, with this kind of trajectory, then they're giving fodder actually for the opposition, and maybe even in the coming elections, Ramaphosa or even ANC as a party may not make it, not necessarily even in the quest for presidency, but even when it comes to other elective posts. Yeah.
But of course, Ramaphosa is serving his last term,
sure.
So maybe that will be a reprieve for him, but still, the politics of revenge and sabotage in Africa, I think, is what is really holding us from moving forward. And also, I've read earlier in Mali, President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has announced 3 days of national mourning in homage of the victims of Sobane, the village massacre that happened over the weekend. And also in Cameroon, Defense Ministry said that over 300 heavily armed Boko Haram fighters attacked military positions in Iraq. So we see all this is Boko Haram, and it originated from Nigeria. President Buhari yesterday, when he was talking during the celebration of Democracy Day in Nigeria, of course, as I talked about earlier, they came out to say, he's trying to curb the scourge of Boko Haram and he's doing very well. But we know the stories we read here. The information from the ground is very, very different. In fact, Boko Haram has grown in leaps and bounds since President Buhari came into office. And there has been some allegations and some accusations leveled towards that. And people has been saying, Buhari seems to be the owner of this group, because a lot of even countries like South Africa or even the UN or even the US actually had offered to help Nigeria curb this scourge of Boko Haram. But Buhari told them, no, I got this. But so far, what do you make of that?
One, I mean, President Buhari rode into victory through that. I mean, one of his agenda was to actually get rid of Boko Haram. You remember, he used to promise that once he gets into office, he should only be given 100 days to make sure that Boko Haram actually is not actually continues to disturb the people of Nigeria. But what we have been seeing is the exact opposite. That tells you, and maybe I will concur with your reasoning and most of the people's opinion, that probably he has a hand in this. I mean, it cannot be that one of the biggest agendas that we are campaigning or you rode on to be elected, you have not even achieved the minimum of expected of you. So it tells you that President maybe Buhari, I can't quite say authoritatively that maybe he's part and parcel of it, or is the honor, or is the financial. But again, people will be forgiven to try to think so, that why is it that he's not succeeding in getting rid of Boko Haram when primarily he promised that he was going to get rid of them in 100 days, because it's like he knew the networks, he knew the routes, and that is why he was confident that he was going to get rid of Boko Haram. Or maybe it's something that he planted and it was something that he knew it was going to make him...
and maybe it got out of hand.
Yeah.
Allegedly, we know.
It may not really be the case, but
yes.
maybe he sees it as something that will continually make him to be in power, or even to get the proxy when he retires from office. So it's something that is somehow complex in a way to understand really whether President himself can be part and parcel of a group that is ruining the lives and the future generations in Nigeria. It's very unfortunate.
This is Africa and anything is possible. But are you also not very curious as to why, with all these reports that has been received and all the kidnappings of the schoolgirls in Chibok, remember the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls, and all this mayhem Boko Haram is causing, and the growth it's really gaining ground across Africa. But are you curious as to why the AU has not even sat down to think that this is actually should be an urgent agenda for them to discuss before this Boko Haram problem spreads in majority of countries in Africa?
Well, it's not lost to us, Miriam, that the AU has not been actually proactive when it comes to matters affecting our continent. In fact, sometimes it even calls us asking questions, why exactly do we have, the African Union in the first place? Why is Africa actually even funding this institution? Because they're not doing much as expected of them. There are so many challenges, not only as regards to Boko Haram in Nigeria, there are so many challenges that this continent faces today, from Cameroon to Nigeria, you go to DR Congo, you go to most of these countries. I mean, it's actually pathetic. And you ask yourself, why is it that sometimes even when they take action, it looks like it's a semi-permeable kind of action. You saw last time when they were responding about what was happening in Sudan, and of course the suspension of Sudan in the activities of the African Union. But there are so many other worse things that have been happening in this continent where we've never had a single statement coming from the African Union itself, especially from the chair, that is Mohamed Faki. It's actually something that is very discouraging, especially as a continent, when we have an entity that is supposed to respond to such kind of urgent issues, just looking into them. We will not have the audacity even to question the international bodies or even the other Western power countries, why they are not helping or responding or actually exerting pressure on our very own African countries, when even the neighboring countries or even presidents cannot even actually reprimand their very own colleagues for what they are doing for their people. So it's something that is really a challenge on us. And when we get into another election in the African Union, I think maybe we need to see how we are going to change it. But again, the biggest deficit we are also facing in this African Union is funding, because now the African Union is like a puppet for the West. We are not actually, they do not have control of their own, simply because we are getting funding from the international community, we are getting funding from the Western power countries, and maybe from other civil organizations. So it becomes very difficult for these entities to operate actually independently, and most times when they have to act under the direction of some of these other agencies outside our continent.
All right, Bidal, you're saying Kenya needs an independent and impartial judiciary, period. You know what? I agree with you, and I'm sure many Kenyans would agree with that sentiment. And Prejo, so you're saying good morning from London. Indeed, a very good morning to to you. Trump visited there the other day, and the reception was just something else when Trump visited London last week. And it's a very interesting man. Anyway, let's not even get into that. He started insulting the mayor of London before he even landed. Like Perejo, how was the visit of Mr. Trump in London last week? And Londoners were not very kind to him either. You saw those balloons, and the baby Trump sitting in a golden toilet seat. That must have iced that man seriously. But Trump himself said, Londoners loved me. They gave me a very warm welcome. I saw protesters shouting my name. I thought, you know what, something is wrong with you. But anyway.
As for Trump, for me, it doesn't quite surprise me.
Yes.
Whatever kind of comments he makes on things, on very even serious matters, not only affecting US but also affecting the entire world.
Yes.
Sometimes, I never take him seriously. So I'm not really very surprised when I see or hear what Trump has said on very pertinent issues here.
Yes. All right. Chimazuru Silas is saying Nigeria must be destroyed soon. All hail Biafra. And before Nigeria is destroyed soon, I think Boko Haram needs to be destroyed, because this is becoming a problem. There has been some element of Boko Haram in the DRC. There are others who are actually murdered in Uganda. I think I was reading that news here the other day. So it's not just in West Africa and North Africa. It is spreading very slowly. And when they meet and have a fellowship with Al-Shabaab this side, nobody is safe in Africa. And there are also some elements in Mozambique and Southern Africa. So Africa, we're not safe.
I would like really to discourage such kind of thought that maybe we need to destroy Nigeria. As much as we are not really happy with what is happening in Nigeria, or the people of Biafra not happy with what is happening in Biafra land, especially as regards to the leadership of President Buhari and not giving them an opportunity to determine their fate through a referendum. There's an African saying that goes, if you want to remove a jigger, you cannot just quite cut the whole leg. You have to ensure that you remove the jigger and let the leg be. So you cannot destroy the entire Nigeria simply because there's a problem, or President Buhari has not addressed the crisis in Biafra land. So something that has to be addressed differently without really affecting the entire generation and the entire motherhood of Nigeria. Because again, this country is not only about the people who are there today, it's also about the future generation. So you cannot be on the forefront to destroy your very own country. You have to protect it. It does not matter the challenges we are going through as a continent or as individual countries. The most important thing is to find solutions to these challenges and not completely destroying our countries.
Yes, indeed. And still in some insurgents in Africa, we go to the DRC, and some 100,000 people have fled villages in the northeastern Ituri province of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And this is, according to its governor, Jean Babanisa. And it comes after 38 people were killed when an armed man raided villages on Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah.
When is it going to stop?
It's a nightmare.
This is the DRC, a country that is coming from a precipitate of war in the past. And the peace now is very delicate with the political dynamics and the settings right now. And now there's an insurgence. And remember, Bemba is back in the country. I think he came back on Sunday. And also Moise Katumbi came back about a month ago. And these were hardcore opposition figures that could not be in the country while President Joseph Kabila still be the president of the DRC. Actually, got chased them out of the country. But now we see such an insurgence. And it is said that the army says it has identified the perpetrators, a relatively new militia led by a man named Gujolo or something like that.
Miriam, let me just give a very light analogy. A few days ago, I went somewhere and I had some time with my friends, very good friends, who apparently come from the Luo part of Kenya. And they were telling me they are not actually happy, or rather, they are dissatisfied with the fact that maybe Raila Odinga shook hands with President Kenyatta, and it is taken them too long actually to throw stones. That is what they are telling me. I mean, we are used to this kind of life. We're never used to this kind of, the kind of peace. This tranquility, the kind of peace. Worrying. Yeah, that is where we actually we thrive.
I hope it was a joke.
I don't know whether it was a joke. I
just hope it was a joke.
Whether it was a joke or not, whatever it is.
Disturbing.
Yeah,
there has been such memes on in all over the social media.
Yeah.
Like now we're just idling here. I mean, we need some work.
Yeah. How come we have not thrown stones for, considerable period of time? This is what we are used to. You get the point. So, I'm just trying to relate this with what you're telling me regarding with DR Congo. There are people who have come from, a volatile season. Politically, we've had so much violence in DR Congo. At a time when we are trying just to nurture and ensure there's this stability and peace, there are people who are feeling uncomfortable with the peace and stability. So it's a very big irony that you have people who do not want to see this actually work out. They do not want to see this peace prevail.
But I want to believe your friends were joking, but they're actually...
I also want to hope so.
But they actually...
Theirs was, I think, was just jokingly. I mean, they were not that serious.
We've seen a part of opposition in this country who are not happy with this peace we're enjoying. And they're working day and night to demonize it.
It is just like people who are, for example, working in the morgue, or people who are working to make the coffins. They will always pray they get customers. Let me ask you, what are the customers for? Who are the customers for the coffin makers, for example?
Yes. So they
will always
business today is
for them, when they hear that maybe someone
so
has
when they
died,
tell you business is slow today, you want to just run away.
Yeah, they want you to die so that at least business can boom. You get the point.
Yes.
So it is like that is on a lighter note. I don't really mean that maybe our coffin makers take pride in people's death so that they can actually cash in. But the most important thing is that we need to continually remind DR Congo that it is important for them to nurture this peace. It's a very delicate thing. They have come from a very an election that we hoped maybe was not going to go down well. But for a long time in history, we've had that transition smooth, although with some agitation. With some people feeling like it was just maybe a coronation, or President Kabila has just had his, proxy in power, whatever it is. But at least the most important thing is that people can continually go about their business without violence, without any disruptions, without lack of peace. That is the most important thing. Because again, also, democracy cannot just be in an open field. Democracy also has to be guided in whichever way. Maybe it was in the best interest of President Kabila to see into it that maybe having this President Tshisekedi come into place, he was going to go along with his agenda. He was going to actually continue with his legacy and maybe ensure we are not going to have the violence that we have been witnessing in the past.
I said after President Tshisekedi is done with his term, he's actually coming again. And the constitution in the DRC then does not allows him actually to do that. And when you look at right now, I think Kabila is still reigning in that country. He has 60% of the cabinet secretaries' slots.
Yeah. As a journalist and a commentator, I will say that I'm not really encouraging that from President Kabila. I call him president because, again, in Africa, many times when someone leaves office, we are used to calling them former presidents. But I think they really appreciate, or they are happy to hear that they're still called presidents.
No, they are former presidents.
Former presidents.
We cannot massage their egos.
But in America, they still call Obama President Obama. They call him President Obama.
Former president.
They call him. That is how they refer. Even today, if when Trump is addressing something and is making any reference to a president who served before him, he refers to them as, President so-and-so, President Clinton or President Barack Obama. That is what US is for us. But for Africa, it's a little bit different. You've seen even Raila Odinga in Kenya trying to struggle so much, and the people around him still call him a prime minister. The thought is maybe without another prime minister, he still remains a prime minister because there's no any other apart from him.
Yes.
But moving forward, I think we need continually to remind the people of DR Congo, this is very important, and for President Kabila, that DR Congo is not just about him. It's about other people. It's about a majority of the people in DR Congo. If he has the interest of the people at heart, he has to ensure that their will actually prevails, especially in another election after the tenure of the current president actually comes to an end. Because again, he will be seeking maybe another term, or like you've said, maybe Kabila has hinted he will be coming back again. But I do not think that this will be the best way to go. In any case, power sometimes corrupts. With Tshisekedi having come in as a president now, don't tell me that it will be rosy. It will be easy for President Kabila to come again and oust Tshisekedi. He will want to go again for another term. So that is the point, maybe, when the ordinary people or the will of the majority will actually have its way. Why am I saying so? Because you'll have the two people who are in power, quote unquote, who are actually not agreeing on anything. So they'll be giving a leeway to the opposition or any other lot that is actually disgruntled by their kind of leadership to actually make it through the ballot if the election is going to be free and fair.
And that is free and fair is something that has always been under contention.
Is another story.
Because even in the DRC's election, remember the elections were supposed to have happened in 2016.
Yeah. They kept on postponing.
2 years later, by 2 years. And so this guy stayed in power. And even with that, they were looking for excuses. You find that a few days to elections, some election materials are burnt. I don't know in which county, in which place, in which province. And also they made sure that the opposition strongholds from 3 major provinces did not vote. But of course they're saying, Ebola is there and it's not very safe. But the Ministry of Health had come out to say it is safe. It is contained, so actually people can vote. So we can see how they sort of, it was, so even today, Martin Fayulu does not recognize President Tshisekedi as the duly elected president of the DRC, but he has been inaugurated. He took the oath of office. So we recognize him as the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo. But also when you look at Kabila and how he during his time of ruling and even now how he is acting, well, there hasn't been so much, we haven't had so much from him. Do you think he got over the fact that his father was murdered? Or there's something that he has there that normally is just, I don't know. Like I felt he was holding the people of DRC hostage by refusing to even have another election.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that election for as long as it never happened.
Yes.
When we used to see Kabila give every other excuse every day, like today we don't have money to run the election, another time we need to register more people to have this election. It is like it was a condition. It was like a prerequisite by the election body that you need to register a given number of people before you get into an election. In any case, he himself had been elected into office by these very voters, and he's saying that we cannot go to another election before we enroll more voters. I mean, it was one of the conditions that he was giving, and so we do not have enough money even to carry out this registration of new voters and carry out the election exercise itself. At some point, even the international bodies, including even Western power countries, offered to give money to DR Congo to conduct an election, but still, President Kabila said the country is not yet ready for an election. He continued to give these excuses. But again, he should be content with what he has done. He should be content with the fact that he has led that country more than he had been he was expected to be in office. If he wants to come back again, I think that is what is going to destroy him completely, because as at now, he's enjoying that considerable peace. Nobody's disturbing him now that he has a proxy as a president. So he has to actually see how he's going to maneuver his way and make friends with the current president. Of course, they are friends, and also maybe potentially the person who may replace.
They're not very good friends, actually, because, being that President Kabila's party has the majority in the Senate, in governors and the members of parliament, so he is required by the law to propose a prime minister, which he did. But the first one he proposed, Tshisekedi refused. And it became a stalemate for a couple of weeks until they had to come to a concession. So you can see, as much as Tshisekedi is in working relation with the President Kabila, but also he's not really, he wants to be his own man. He wants to become his own person and lead in whichever way possible. And we can see with the number of strides he's been making since he was inaugurated as the president. He's reaching out to allies that were not getting along with President Kabila. He's going against everything President Kabila had been doing during his leadership. He's allowed the opposition the president took out of the country to come back. He was able to go get his father and bury him after 2 years being in Brussels. Tshisekedi's father died in Brussels 2 years later.
Belgium.
Yes. So you can imagine. So President Tshisekedi is trying to be his own person, create his own, carve his own path, but the tentacles, and being that former president, okay, you say we call him president.
President Kabila.
President Kabila.
That is as for me.
His party and his authority is still very strongly there because he has the majority, and I don't think they're very. And President Kabila's party may decide, you know what, that bill is not passing. And then what? So until when will President Tshisekedi dance to the tune of Kabila? At some point, even now, I think it's a bit very. It's not exactly rosy there.
One, Miriam, and for the benefit of the viewer, transition is not an overnight thing. You can just wake up, especially with the challenge that President Tshisekedi is facing in DR Congo today. You've alluded to the fact that the President Kabila has a majority in, say, for example, Parliament. So it makes it very difficult even for Tshisekedi to run the affairs of government without really getting the blessings of the patron of these individuals who have been elected through his party. So it's a very big big challenge on his side. So he can't just wake up one day and actually cut links with the President Kabila simply because he wants to chart a different trajectory altogether. That is not to say that it's not time for him to change things for the people of DR Congo. The fact that the people of DR Congo decided to elect President Tshisekedi and not any other person, they believed in some of his policies, the campaign agenda with which actually he rode on to be elected. Maybe some of them were to address some of these challenges that the people of DR Congo felt bringing conflict in as far as the governance in DR Congo is concerned. So one of it probably was to give amnesty to, maybe to political detainees or people who had fled that country because of one reason or the other, or President Kabila did not want to see them back in that country. So he's doing that not because of his differences with Kabila, but because a majority of the people will want to see him actually do that. And probably that is what he was actually promising when he was campaigning to be elected. So there are so many things that maybe actually he's supposed to address. And some of these things may go against the wish and will of President Joseph Kabila, but he has to do them nonetheless because it's for the benefit of a majority of the people of DR Congo.
Yes, indeed. And Africa Rising, like you said, you're tuned in from Kuala. Thank you. CK Oguson, you're watching from Thailand. And Austin CA, you're saying good morning. Punchline Africa, you're watching from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And all right, I think I'd read that. So Everestas Ogumia, good morning. And Chimazuru Silas is saying Nigeria. Okay, you said Nigeria must be destroyed. But also, when Samuel Tawisha said, you know what, we don't want Nigeria to be destroyed. We have to, you can't cut the whole leg because a part of
you want to remove a
jigger. So maybe just Biafra should be allowed to go, perhaps. Yeah. But also, he came back with that agenda and he said, Nigeria is a jungle, Mr. Presenter. You can't live there. And he's also added that Biafra must emerge with a victory. So your sentiments, thank you so much. So now maybe we just take a short break, and when we come back, we look at the Kenya's budget 2019-2020. Remember, the CS for Treasury today will unveil our spending plans for the next financial year, 2019-2020. And we have one of the most ambitious and the biggest budget this country has seen since independence, 3.02 trillion Kenya shillings. Wow. I was just sitting down and just adding those numbers. Zeros. I got tired. I didn't even get to the trillion. So we'll take a break and then we'll come back and look at that.
Okay.
Viewers, good morning, Africa, wherever you are. We are looking at the rise from the ashes of the judiciary of the Republic of Kenya. For the last 2 years, since the nullification of elections of 2017, the judiciary of the Republic of Kenya has been on the headlines and in every newspaper worldwide, nationally, regionally, and Africa at large. The nullification of that election brought what we call a dual system of courage of justice.
That the presidential election held on 8th August 2017 was not conducted in accordance with the Constitution, the applicable law, rendering the declared results invalid, null, and void.
The justice, civil society, international civil society, and the local civil societies, and the justice demanded by the interest of the nation. Given the two, which one do Kenyans want? Do they want the interest of the nation? In the interest of the nation, President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta decided to go back to campaign in order to show the world that he was able, and he is able, and he was the winner. The campaigns took place, an election was reconducted. For the second time, Uhuru emerged the winner of that election. From then, the judiciary has never been a judiciary for the people of Kenya. It has been a judiciary commanded, supported, equipped NGOs or NGOs that tell them on what to do, not to do. And above all, being activists. We have seen a number of judges making decisions that are not in the interest of the judiciary and not in the interest of the country at large. The release of terrorists from that has caught our eye. In Africa School, we believe that Chief Justice Maraga.
Good morning. No, good afternoon. Right now it is a good afternoon, 24 minutes past noon here in Nairobi. A very good afternoon to you, or good morning. I don't know where you're watching us from this morning. I see also people watching us all the way from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So it could be good evening over there. Please let us know. And others watching us from Australia now, I know that is evening over there. So thank you so much, Mike Napo. You're saying good morning indeed. Good morning to you. Africa Rising, you're back. You're watching us again. Of course, we've been looking at the news making headlines across this continent, and we looked at South Africa, we looked at the Democratic Republic of Congo, and we've also looked at Sudan and the latest in Sudan and what is happening in the with the Ebola. I think it's spreading, but it's now in Uganda. One case was realized in Uganda, but World Health Organization is just telling countries surrounding these areas to be, and it has of course come from the DRC, to be very vigilant and careful. And we also looked at Nigeria, and we've looked at Mali and Cameroon and the latest deaths that has been caused by the insurgent Boko Haram, and why is even African Union have not considered this to be an urgent matter when they're going to these summits and they're having these meetings at Addis Ababa. Why hasn't Boko Haram even featured as something that should be given an urgent, it should be given all the attention it deserves, because this thing will get out of hand if it is not handled right now. And also, it's just other things. Algeria, the protesters, as opposed to Sudan. I know we are getting into the topic right now. We are talking about the Kenyan budget today. So if you're having any questions, please let us know. And also, while we are still on that, today is the Day of the African Child, and this day is celebrated every 16th of June every year since 1991, and it was first initiated by the Organization of African Unity, and it honors those who participated in the Soweto uprising in 1976. So it happened. These children in Soweto in 1976 were protesting, and of course the black majority, and remember the white minority, were having all the best things in that country. So the kids from South Africa, the black kids, the South Africans, they went out to protest, and they were demanding for quality education, and also they wanted to be taught with their own languages in school. So that day was very significant, and so the AU has chosen to remember to put this day as a commemoration, and also it is used to advance and to make sure that countries across Africa make sure that their children get proper education. And when you talk about proper education, and sometimes in the news you see some kids in Kwale County sitting on rocks and writing on their thighs. I get very sad when I come across such images. It saddens me.
Sure.
It completely saddens me. And then I wake up in the morning, I'm coming here and I'm seeing 7 billion lost. I just want to pull my hair. I can't.
And more allocation to the same sector, to the education sector, and nothing is being done.
But yes,
education sector, and also the CDF kitty. They are supposed to improve. I mean, the CDF kitty is also supposed to improve this infrastructure.
I blame the county governments. When you see a school is lacking, they don't even have a classroom. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have enough teachers. They don't have. Why? That is why we needed devolution, because the national government cannot really get into the roots there. That's why you have the MCAs. Do they even know their jobs to identify priorities when it comes to development in these counties? You know what? Let's just get to the Kenya's budget.
It's not a case of trying to vindicate county government when it comes to education, but because this again remains with the national government. That's why you see this allocation being done by Treasury to the CDF and to the education docket. So it's not really the county government responsibility to ensure. It may be like as a moral calling for them to, like, there are things you see like they're actually in a mess, but you don't have to wait for the person to come and correct the mess if at all you can, or you're in a position to do to correct the mess. So that is the challenge that we are facing. As for the county governments, I think the responsibility for them is more of the technical tertiary institutions like the polytechnics, I suppose, and the ECDs. But again, when it comes to primary schools and secondary schools, this solely lies with the national government. And so we have these allocations that are being actually put into these key sectors. But by the end of the day, you won't see anything actually tangible out of this budget. So let's get there. I don't know what questions you have to do to ask about this budget today.
Discussion, and maybe we'll go through the information that we have in the local dailies here. And Soman Nahatun, you're watching from Germany. Guten Morgen, is it? Or is it Guten Tag yet? It's Guten Morgen. And Teng Gang, you're saying you're watching from Melbourne, Australia. Thank you so much. Chimazuru Silas, thank you so much. Hey, Teng, are you, I don't know if you're coming from South Sudan, but the other day here, I remember 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, your government came out and said it was broke, closed down 40 embassies, fired 39 of its diplomats from across the world. But just on Friday, the International Monetary Fund released a report saying South Sudan had made a profit of $2.4 billion US. Like, I've still not gotten over that information. So I don't know what you think about. And also today's the Day of the African Child. Has the continent been very kind to the child of Africa? When you look at the children who have been suffering in South Sudan, in Mali right now, they're going to live in the bushes because there's been attack by Boko Haram. And then you see a country like Ambazonia, Biafra, children in Biafra. Do you know that it is Biafra land when the war started, that the medical fraternity of the Médecins Sans Frontières was actually born in Biafra land. After a French doctor was there visiting, and he saw how during the war, the government has stopped any food coming to Biafra land, any aid coming from Biafra land. So children in Biafra land, when you see those images, you'll even cry, were emaciated, they were dying from kwashiorkor, they were not being treated. The government shut down any services towards Biafra land. So this doctor, while he was visiting, he said no. He went and brought some of his French doctors, and they started treating the people of Biafra land, and that's how Médecins Sans Frontières was actually born in Biafra land. So some bit of history over there. But now, Henry Rotich is coming today with a 3.202 trillion budget for Kenya, and education will once again take lion's share and estimated of 773.3 billion Kenya shillings. And we're here saying that there are some schools where children still sit on rocks. It's flooded. They don't even have the proper structures and proper teachers. This money, does it just pay the teachers and then what?
Well, this money is not just about paying the teachers, maybe salaries. It's also more of like hiring new teachers. It's also more of trying to promote teachers who are also in different cadres. It's also about improving our facilities today. It's also more of ensuring that we have, of course, you remember now we have the new curriculum which is supposed to be implemented, and it's also going to take a huge chunk of that budget, because again, you need to train the teachers to be in tandem with this new curriculum, much as, of course, there's no more time. We need to actually get these people be trained to understand the new curriculum so that the same can be passed to our learners. So, but by and large, the most important thing in this budget, and critically looking at the education allocation, we don't want to see some of the pathetic scenes that we have been seeing in recent past. We do not want to see that we have this all monies being allocated to this sector, yet we have, places that pupils do not even have places to sit on. They do not have even classrooms. They don't have enough materials for learning. It is not enough to just allocate this budget and not make a follow-up on how it is going to be utilized, because if we don't do that, if you're not going to be vigilant on this, it's going to end in a few people's pockets, which has become like tradition in Kenya today. So those are the things that we are going to be very, very keen on how we are going to achieve this. Because remember, Kenya today is living like almost on a loan. We are consuming that which we do not even have. It is like you going to the bank today, you got like 50,000 shillings or 100,000 shillings you've been paid. But again, you just go to the bank and it's like you're paying for an overdraft, or you're paying for the loan that you took from the bank. So you go again to bottom zero. You go again and begin from the drawing board. So it's a very big challenge. We need to rethink as a country. We are not collecting enough in form of taxes. And the new person who is coming into place, he goes by the name James Mburu, if I'm not wrong, the KRA boss. He should actually implement new policies. We want to see him initiate and implement new policies that are going to go a long way in addressing this deficit that we have been seeing in as far as collection of taxes at the KRA is concerned. We cannot have our sector growing, the economy growing, population growing, businesses being created every other day, investors coming into the country, but yet again we can't quite see this being translated when it comes to revenue collection. There's something wrong. If it's about corruption in this particular agency, it has to be looked into, and those who are culpable actually arrested and prosecuted. I think that is how we are going to get serious in as far as this is concerned. Because if we continue like this, we have a budget which has now been famed as one of the most over-ambitious ever from the time we got independence.
It's the biggest budget.
Yeah, and yet we cannot quite even fund the rest of this budget. We have to still borrow. We have not paid some of the debts that we have actually borrowed. So it is a very big challenge for the country.
61% of the revenue that is being collected by the Kenya Revenue Authority goes to financing these debts. 61% of our taxes goes to debts.
So that's why I'm saying we are living on a loan. Yeah, we are living on a loan. We have a budget. We have a budget in form of figures, but it's something like we have already consumed. It's like we don't actually have anything even to use. These are just but figures we are going to be given. But already even some of these monies could have been spent already. I mean, it's just but budget, which is done for formality purpose. But as we speak today, and we have to be candid enough, government is really feeling the pinch of this, and for it to remain afloat, of course, we need to continually appeal to people or appeal to Kenyans to continually pay taxes, so that at least we can try to bridge that gap. It's a very, very big gap in as far as budget collection is concerned, revenue collection is concerned, so that we are in a position to fund this budget. We cannot rely on borrowing to fund our very own budget. We'd rather say we've got enough even to run the affairs of the government, but we can borrow for other extra activities. For example, if we have other projects that do not necessarily have not necessarily been captured in this particular budget. So, but if we do this, doing a budget that we are actually factoring in, the success of borrowing for us to be able to fund this budget. So it's a very big challenge.
It's a very big challenge. And of course, the reason why the education sector is the one who will have the lion's share of today's budget with an estimated 473.3 billion Kenya shillings is because the sector has prioritized recruiting additional teachers to support 100% transition to secondary school, which is something that President Uhuru Kenyatta, I think it's very, very laudable, and that is a good gesture. But the schools were not prepared for the 100% transition. So will this money go a long way into ensuring that our children actually get education? And when they're getting this education, is it quality education?
Yeah, that's why we're having a new curriculum, because again, the previous curriculum, according to education experts, some of them feel like it was not really maybe in tandem with our needs as a country. Maybe it's also not in tandem with the entire curriculum in the region. So it was good actually to try and see how we can reconcile this, so that actually when even kids are going to school to learn, they're learning that thing that is going to benefit them in future. You get the point? There are people who have been making fun. You remember when you go through social media, there are people who are saying, when I was in school, I used to learn about chlorophyll, parts of a flower. And today they're asking, really, how is the parts of flower really helping me today in a contemporary life? That is how, it's just information, yes, but how is it really helping me? So that's why we need to shift from that old curriculum to the new curriculum. In this case, we are going to have actually to take through kids to take them through an education system that is actually commensurate with what they want to undertake in future. You get the point. So that's why I'm saying that this new curriculum is coming in handy, and we need to embrace it. We need to see our teachers actually being trained on how they are going to carry out this, and also the kids, because they are very excited. They want to see how this new curriculum is going to pan out and how it's going to benefit them in as far as education is concerned.
All right, it's called the performance-based curriculum, or what is the name of it?
Performance-based, so that you don't just sit for maybe 7-8 years in primary school, and you're going to be rated by one exam. I mean, it has to be what they used to call CAT. I'm sure you must have done it. The continuous assessment test.
I did something very different, because in my time we had home science, we had art and craft, we had agriculture. So by the time you're actually finishing your primary school, you had some certain level of skills. I can go to a tools, whatever, and identify this is this, because I was taught. So after that, I think this sort of watered down. What we're having right now is they took so much from it that I believe would have benefited these kids, because I benefited from it. By the time I was through, I could cook certain things, because we had home science class.
There was cooking.
And during those classes, we were taught very candidly about certain things that right now is not being taught, and also arts and crafts. We could actually use you become handy. So you cannot just sit in the house. I was joking with the director here the other day. They're like, Miriam, you can't even handle this. I don't know what is it they were looking for help with. I think it must have been some. And I said, no, I actually even changed my bulb holder. And he was shocked. Yes, because I learned my art and craft. So I can't just be stuck. I can't do something. No, I can actually do something to save my life, because I was taught. But this, what we have now, I think they took so much from it. So I don't know what.
It was diluted.
Very much diluted. I think when a child finishes class 8, they don't even have the skill to do anything in life.
Yeah, sure.
They really can't help themselves. It was really, really, really diluted.
That's why you see there's a very big difference between the people who maybe went to school, say for example 80s and back maybe in 70s or 60s there. I mean, when you look into a person who actually went to even up to standard 8, their quality of education, the kind of product that we had then, even those who are living today, I mean, it's a great testament. You can't compare with people who have just gone through this other education system. You can't compare standard 8 then and a form 4 today. I mean, there's a very sharp difference.
There is. And also they want to, there's that matter that I think President Uhuru Kenyatta also introduced. Free education was introduced by former president, or its president, Mwai Kibaki. And also now President Uhuru Kenyatta introduced free days secondary education. And also they want to prioritize when it comes to support to special needs education, which I think is just a sector in our education sector, part of it that has been neglected. Because I think special needs children, majority of the parents, or I don't know, it's just is it a taboo, or is it just I don't know, we not many kids are even taken to school, or even if they want to take their children to school, you realize you have to travel to maybe the other side of the country to even get a school that actually can accommodate your special children's your child with the special needs. So with the money being given to such an important, I think it's very important in the education sector, the special needs education, and now the government has allocated funds for this sector. Will that go a long way in helping these parents who, because those schools are extremely expensive.
Yeah, sure.
Very, very expensive. So will it relieve the parents with kids with special needs?
Yeah. On that note, Miriam, I suppose, I mean, it has something to do with the stigma. Most parents who, for example, get to bear these children who have these challenges sometimes feel like, I mean, maybe it's a curse, or they cannot go and be with other kids. I mean, they're going to be mocked, they're going to be maybe victimized and such kind of things. They feel like they need to take them to these special schools, private for that matter. But again, we can't quite, I mean, say they don't have that right to do that, because if you can afford that kind of education, or you can afford that cost to take your kid to a private, an expensive private school, so be it. But as for those who cannot afford it, I think it's a welcome idea that the president is really putting more funding. and ensuring that we have better facilities for those kids who have these challenges, so that they do not have any reason to say, or even their parents to say, I could not take them to school, because most of the schools do not have the facilities or even the teachers to actually cater for the special needs. So it's very important that we give a keen look and a keen interest into this, and ensure that this budget is actually going to go a long way in addressing these challenges, because these kids as well, they have a right to education. We can't quite segregate them as much as maybe, I mean, for the parents who have the ability to take them to private schools. For us, we have to ensure that these facilities and the teachers also have been adequately trained to be able to respond to their needs.
Yes, indeed. And of course, President Uhuru Kenyatta, when he came in, I think now the government is providing the examination fees, is paying for the examination fees for the KCP, the primary school national examinations, and also the KCSE test. So that was quite a relief from a lot of parents, because the last time I checked, I don't know, was it my sister who wanted for the exam fee for KCSE, and she told me how much. I thought, what? It has nearly tripled since the last time, that I paid that. So it was becoming very expensive, especially parents who are coming from marginalized communities. And so that is a good thing. The government is taking care of that.
As media, we also need to look into how we're going to help government in this. We need to maybe get a program where we'll be having, like, to name and shame individuals or even institutions that continually want even to charge parents when in fact the government has already actually allocated funds, for example, for the examination for the entire free primary education or even secondary education. You have still some principals and head teachers who continually want to actually ask money from their parents to pay, or they institute some illegal levies which actually are not are even captured in the tuition fees. So it's a very big challenge we have on that as well, Miriam. I think much as the president is doing this, much as government is trying its level best. I remember many times President Kenyatta has come out and also Deputy President that the government is fully funding free primary and secondary education, but there are still some people who are chasing kids home to look for more money. So we need to understand, where are these gaps? What is it that the government is paying, and what is it that the headmasters and head teachers are still asking for? This is the corruption that we are talking about. It's not just about the money that is being stolen in the parastatals. When you have a head teacher who wants to ask for an extra 100 shillings for something that is not actually it's something that is we are not quite sure about. They constitute, or rather institute, illegal levies just to get more funding, to get more monies from the parents. I think these are things that we need to reprimand.
Yes, and in case you're wondering why you're dwelling so much on education, it is because today is the Day of the African Child, and this day is commemorated every 16th of June every year, and it started in 1991. This is after some students in South Africa in 1976 protested on this day, demanding for quality education. The black South Africans, they were demanding for quality education, and also they were demanding to be taught in their schools using their own language. So that is why this day is very important, even as the countries in East Africa go to read their budgets today. And in Kenya, of course, education took the lion's share of Kenya's budget today. But also there's something here, and I saw yesterday, I saw some members of parliament talking about it. They sort of want more money, but the Senate is okay with the 371.6 billion that was presented to them by the budget, parliamentary budget committee. That is what they were allocated. They're supposed to get, and the Senate is okay with that. But members of parliament want that slashed to 314 billion. From 371.6 to 314 billion, and also the allocated equalization fund for the new financial year is 5.8 billion compared to 8.5 billion this year. So the equalization for the new financial year is 5.8 compared to the 2018-2019, which was 8.5 billion. So I'm sure this is something that the members of parliament will fight, because this is the money that has been the most misappropriated. The equalization fund, in case you're wondering, this is found in the It actually was formed after an act of parliament, and it is Article 204 in the Kenyan Constitution. You'll go there and you'll find the Equalization Fund, and the national government, according to our constitution, shall use the Equalization Fund only to provide basic services including water, roads, health facilities, and electricity to marginalized areas to the extent necessary to bring for equality. So it was meant to bring every county and every marginalized area. Remember, for a long time, people from northeastern part of this country. My dad used to joke. He used to work with the army, so he was very. So when you talk to somebody from, say, Turkana or northeastern part of the country, they'll be like, "I'm actually coming from Turkana and I'm going to Kenya." Or I'm coming from Mandera and I'm going to Kenya, because those were countries that were the most marginalized during the long reign of former President President Moi, and so they never felt as they were part of this country, the feeling of Biafra land. But anyway, that part of the country has not wanted to secede from Kenya. So it is in that spirit that it was thought very important while they were making this new constitution to have an equalization fund to make sure these counties that are marginalized for a very long period of time were brought into par in terms of matters development. But when you look at what we have today, man,
Miriam,
I don't know if it's doing this fund is doing what it was meant to do at all.
When you don't have a proper infrastructure, for example, for the schools or for the kids to learn, you don't have maybe say water. A case in point, maybe Turkana or some of these eastern provinces, the former eastern province, Ukambani region. I mean, the question is, who is really responsible? Is it not really more of man-made? Because if monies are being allocated to these particular, counties to be in a position to address some of these challenges that these counties are facing, people did not quite understand devolution, the concept of devolution in the first place.
Hey, we in the second term.
Yeah, that is why.
It's like over nearly 10 years.
10 years, 2010 to 2019. I mean, it's almost 10 years.
How long do we have until we really get this concept of devolution?
But there are things we really don't need to be actually taken through in terms of education.
Yes.
We can't go to class to really learn that maybe our people are lacking water. It has been history that maybe Turkana has been facing this challenge or Kambani has been facing this challenge.
And we know every year, the beginning of the year, it is bound to happen.
So the question is, and I think it is time we need to propose. There was that ministry which used to be during Kibaki's regime called the Special Program Ministry. I think instead of even giving this money to the county governments or to places that are marginalized, it's better we allocate this to a specific ministry so that there's one person or a given entity that is actually responsible in addressing these challenges that the people in these particular areas are facing. What reason does he's the president of the county. Normally, that is how they are referred to. What reason will, for example, Nanok, the county chief of Turkana, have for the people not to have water today? What reason will he have to say that people do not have food to eat? When in reality, we have over 10 billion being allocated every financial year to these particular counties, not mentioning even some other grants being given by international communities, NGOs, to actually help these particular marginalized areas. But again, still people continue to face hunger. People do not have water. Education standards are not improved. So what are these monies meant for? You can see even some roads are not even passable. So you ask yourself, the 10 billion Kenya shillings plus the levies that the county government gets every other month or even every other financial year, what is it actually going to do? Or what has it been doing? The county governments cannot actually explain this. Is it easy to go and give relief food as compared to actually just drilling a borehole and ensuring that there's water so that people can do irrigation and farm on their own? Sometimes you can't quite understand this.
Long-term solution.
Yeah, that's why when Amina Mohamed, the current minister for sports, when she was in the foreign docket, I remember, and campaigning for the AU post, she used to stress on this fact that she cannot understand why a continent of Africa still lags behind when it comes to addressing the question of poverty. We are a blessed continent. We have actually arable land, which is very fertile. We have also very favorable climate. Still, we cannot actually cultivate. We cannot have food. So we continually want to cry and say we want relief food. People are dying of hunger. When we can just go and ensure we do what we maybe drill boreholes, or if we have these lakes or we have these big rivers, we can actually divert these waters to do irrigation for our people. But again, when such kind of projects are initiated, like what happened with the Gulana Kulalu project, it never came to pass. It never really came, to fruition. Monies were allocated, but that money went to a few people's pocket. We are talking about Turkana, for example, and the challenge they are facing today. The concept of devolution was to bring these allocations, to bring these monies, to bring administration, and people to understand, people who understand the challenges that the people are facing on ground can really prioritize and see what is it that we can do for our people. But today, more than ever, we're still facing the same challenges. The governors only continue to loot this money, not for the benefit of the people, but for their own and their cronies. So these are some of the things that we really need to think about and see if it is not going to be utilized. Today, I've also seen in that budget that MPs are getting more allocation on CDF. But the CDF is supposed to address what and what. If it's about the roads, the constituency roads, if it's about, for example, improving the education facilities in these particular areas in their constituencies, we want to see this actually being implemented. And not them telling us, this is the money we need, but we are not seeing it in practical on the ground. So these are some things that we need to face head on without really any fear or favor, and tell these people enough is enough. It is time that we really need to see that we are getting services for the taxes that we are paying as Kenyans.
Mm-hmm. And of course, that is what is making headlines in today's papers. This is the Daily Nation. If you can just take a look, and the Daily Nation says how Rotich will share the 3 trillion Kenya shillings pie, and in there they continue to say the Treasury CS will today reveal just how painful funding the biggest budget since independence will be, with slow growth in revenue collection and frequent missed targets by the Kenya Revenue Authority, and with Treasury facing 607 billion Kenya shillings deficit, Rotich will have to borrow heavily. Tighten your belt. And of course this story continues as it's going to be the next 12 months is going to be a roller coaster for Kenyans. So that is just Daily Nation that has made me very worried. And now this one really incited even my feelings. I saw this in the morning and I was like, you know what, I don't even know if I want to get to the details. But this is the Star, one also of one of the leading newspapers here in Kenya, and it's saying how to teach plans to spend your money. I'm thinking, what?
You say you're just getting worried, and Rotich has not even go to Parliament to present the budget. So
yes, so yeah, and also the Standard here. All newspapers today, that is what is making headlines today, and Kenyans are sitting there worried so much, and they don't know what else will they add tax on, because as we talked here yesterday about it, and remember a lot of the basic commodities for Kenyans, man, it's becoming every day, it's becoming a challenge even to afford 3 meals a day for the common Mwananchi citizen here in Kenya. And the Standard is saying why Rotich will hit you hard in budget.
You know, now the train has left the station. There's not much we can do. Those budget estimates, I'm very certain that once presented to Parliament, they are going to be passed, because again, the Budget and Appropriation Committee is already well versed with the budget that Henry Rotich is going to present today. It's only my hope. You know, I'm not saying that this is what I'm appealing again, because now the budget has already been written already. They're just but going to present. It's only my hope that I'm not going to, to heap more burden when it comes to, for example, the basic commodities. I'm talking about bread. I'm referring to milk. I'm referring to, flour. It's a big challenge. We need more ugali on table. At least that which is not going to be that expensive. We need milk. We need bread, and so. The government really needs to look into other avenues on how they're going to generate more revenue. There are so many areas that have never been touched, or they have been massaged for a very long time, and experts feel like maybe these are areas that maybe the Treasury should go for.
Like which area?
For example, maybe say for example the capital gain tax, where for example people who are owning properties and they're selling them, taxation is not really in tandem with what these people are getting. So it's better to try and see how we are going also to reconcile that, so that you do not continually heap this on the ordinary Kenyans, so those who are giving taxes in form of income tax or pay as you earn. So because these people are just getting very little money, But again, they're the people who are overburdened when it comes to taxation.
Yes, and also to add on that, I think that is KRA identified some of these loopholes, and that's why it's been trying to tighten on these loopholes and make sure that actually all Kenyans, because a lot of people are evading tax, like you just mentioned, in certain sectors, and so even landlords, they're meant to be paying tax.
Yeah. In fact, I was reading before we just came to the show that I mean the house girl in your place, in your house, is actually paying tax more than yourself. And the landlord also is paying less tax than yourself, who is a tenant. So that's a very big disparity. How can we bridge this disparity? I mean, we have to be realistic and see into it that we do not overburden an already overburdened taxpayer. There are people who are out there really who are wealthy with a lot of property which is not taxed. There are people who are doing, crude businesses out there, people who are doing importation without really being imposed into any taxation. We need to see how this is going actually to be addressed by Treasury, and not just going into that soft spot of yourself and Tawish, because they feel like maybe this is where it is very easy for them to go. But again, it's not enough to fund this budget.
And of course, also the informal sector in this country, which is the driving force in Kenya's economy. A lot of these people do not pay their tax. And that, I think, advised, there are some allegations. That's why there was the government thought, you know what, Huduma number might bring us these people, because when the government has all your data, every time you go, you bank something, and then if you decide you're not going to bank, you're going to keep that money in the house, guess what, we have new money, so you have to go to bank. There's no running away from paying your taxes. I don't know, are you optimistic about this? I'm already scared. Why Rotich will hit you hard in the budget. I already feel very heat when I go to buy my packet of milk, because the prices went up, I think, a couple of months ago. So I'm already suffering as it is. So are you optimistic?
Well, I still remain optimistic. You remember yesterday I did say I'm optimistic. It is not just time for me to say maybe as Kenyans we are losing hope completely. We have to come to the reality that this is a challenge that we are facing as a country, and we need to find solutions for these challenges. The best way for a problem is not to run away from it, but finding a way on how you're going to give a solution to that problem. It is true that this budget is too much for Kenya. Already we are living on a loan, but the government has to remain afloat. It has to provide services nonetheless. We still have to pay taxes regardless whether we're getting these services or not. The most important thing is that we need also to see Treasury come out with policies that are not going to make it very difficult even for potential investors who still want to come and invest in the country, and lessen some of the strict areas, for example, for the SMEs, the small medium enterprises, because that has also been a challenge. I was reading some article regarding was it somewhere in 2000 or 2002 when Mudavadi was finance minister? He did come out with some policies that actually made it easy for SMEs to thrive. And by doing so, so many people, or so a lot of tax was being collected. I mean, to a percentage of about 60-something%. You get the point. So that was, in essence, really help the government to run their affairs and also provide services for the country or for our people. But as it is now, it has become very difficult. That's why someone will prefer to maybe go to the neighboring country in Uganda and invest. You've heard stories of where people come to Kenya and they feel like, okay, this Tanzania is giving a better option. No one really would want to get or to do something at a bigger cost when there's an option that is actually pocket friendly. You get the point. So people could be running to neighboring countries because it's easy to do business, because of some of the policies or the laws that govern doing business. That's why President Kenyatta was really very keen when it came to SMEs, when it came to the question of, for example, the cost of electricity, because also this plays a pivotal role when it comes to entire cost of production. So people who want to come and do business or invest in our country will be looking into these factors of production and how costly are they? Are they going to be friendly to them? Is it going to be easy for them to do business? Are they going to get any returns for the investments they're making? So we need to encourage people to really come to our country and invest. And for those who have invested already, they should not be feeling this actually huge burden that they're not making any profit or not making any business out of the investment they have put in place.
And of course, these small, medium enterprises, the SMEs, and the informal sector especially, they are the driving force towards even President Kenyatta's achieving one of his big four agendas, that is in manufacturing and housing and things like that. This sector has to prosper so that he's able to achieve, because it has to start from the lower tier going up. So this is a very important sector in terms of the president even realizing his bigger picture Samuel Tawish. We seem to have come to the end of our today's show. Thank you so much. And thank you, our viewer, Tang Beng. You're saying, are you enjoying our show? Thank you so much. And I hear you. There's a comment there you wrote earlier. You know what? I understand what you're saying. And Munir Chol Cham, you're saying, enjoying the show, my Kenyan family. Good afternoon, Punchline Africa. Thank you so much. And good afternoon to you, Munir. And that has been our show today. Remember, it is the 16th of June, 2019, a day that marks the Day of the African Child. And I've been asking and wondering, has this continent been very kind to the African child? And also, it is a day that all East African countries will be having their national budgets read today, and ours will be later on, I think maybe at 2, and the CS of Treasury, Henry Rotich, will have a hard task in, at learning the budget and explaining to Parliament how he intends to fund that very ambitious 3.02 trillion Kenya shillings. I told you, I counted the zeros, my head got tired, I stopped at...
You only wish that you were given maybe just a billion out of all that. Well, and it could solve every of your problems.
Some cartel somewhere is already calculating how they're going to take part of that. So that even gives me more headache. But you know what? We'll come back and we'll talk about this tomorrow in the next edition of Good Morning Africa, and we'll see really, are there going to be any surprises? Or Kenyans, will they continue to be hit hard in terms of the basic commodities? Will this be, I don't know. We'll come back tomorrow here and we'll talk about it after the budget will have been read today later on in Parliament. But for now, from me and Tawish, it is goodbye.